I've come from a musical family. They were always encouraging me to play something. So I took to piano, and I've played piano my whole life. And it's what I spend, 18 hours a day sitting at while I'm writing music. But when I started studying cello, I realized that was an instrument that really was sticking with me. Something about performing on the cello was just very powerful. So I was born into a musical family. My dad has his master's in choral conducting, and my mom plays piano and sings. And so the day I was born, out in Pendleton, Oregon, which is a little rodeo town out in the countryside in Eastern Oregon, my dad was hoping one of his kids might go into music one day. So he brought a bow tie and a conducting baton. And when the people at the hospital wanted to take my picture after I was born, he puts on the little bow tie, gives me the baton, and they take a photo. And not long after that, this photo becomes the cover photo for the hospital, and I'm the little baby on all the pamphlets. And so I think, for me, I consider myself day one having started in the music business, because everything in my life has been about that since then. But something else happened. I began to veer off on my own path because I started becoming a little more obsessed with cinema. I was a big fan of older movies, and I began to notice that whenever I saw the name Alfred Hitchcock on a film, I tended to really like the movie. And over time, I started to recognize a connection I had with other filmmakers' names, Francois Truffaut, Fellini, Kurosawa. And even longer after that, I began to realize I really like the music in these movies. And I noticed for Hitchcock and Truffaut, it's like music by, there was this name that kept appearing all the time, Bernard Herrmann. With Fellini, I started to see the name Nino Rota. And with Kurosawa, Toru Takemitsu. And so these filmmakers, with their composers, sort of became my guiding light as a young musician and sort of a young person interested in the art and craft of cinema. And not long after this, I thought, well, music is really speaking to me. I've come from a musical family. They were always encouraging me to play something. So I took to piano, and I've played piano my whole life. And it's what I spend, 18 hours a day sitting at while I'm writing music. But when I started studying cello, I realized that was an instrument that really was sticking with me. Something about performing on the cello was just very powerful. And not only that, but through junior high school, college, I realized as a cellist, I was playing in all kinds of small ensembles, large ensembles, symphony orchestras. As a cellist, I was a welcome guest into any kind of musical ensemble. And what that meant is I had access to performers. Instead of being some composer on the outside when I was studying music, in college, begging all the really good players to play my stuff, I was someone on the inside, and I could ask whoever I wanted to play for free, if not that, for pizza and beer. So I realized cello was a great access to individual players. But not only that, once I earned the trust of these ensembles, I began to write music for these orchestras. And I would ask the conductor, hey, could we do a reading of this piece I've been working on? They'd say, oh, yeah, for you? Sure. And so I would just get access to test runs with symphony orchestras. And eventually they started just allowing me to program short works on concerts where there'd be maybe two Brahms symphony, or like a Brahms and a Beethoven symphony. But in between, or maybe at the start of the concert, they'd say, hey, we'll give you 5 minutes at the top of the show. And so early in life, I began to practice my writing for ensembles, choirs, bands, and even full orchestras. So even though I grew up in a really small little ranching town in Eastern Oregon, I had plenty of access to opportunity and just sort of made it my own thing. And of course, another interesting thing started happening in my childhood. I began to notice that every time I heard a car honk, or a car horn, or a door close, or something shimmer in a room, or every time a person spoke, little colors would flash by, and I somehow knew for a fact exactly which notes on the piano they were speaking, or that noise in the environment was making, and I couldn't understand it for the life of me. And it became an increasingly terrible distraction when I was a kid. I started to notice that I was horribly distracted at all times by these noises I somehow was seeing colors and exact pitches on the piano with. But that's a story that gets resolved a little later on. And of course, as I'm getting through high school, I started scoring music for plays around town. The high school would have me, write music, or they would send me video cassettes of the plays they were working on, and I would stopwatch time and I would produce music and record it and sync it up with their show, kind of like I was scoring a film. And a lot of those kids who graduated ahead of me would go to colleges and study theater, drama, film. And what they started doing was bringing me on as a composer to their college theater productions and film projects. So by the time I was done with high school, I'd scored something like 7 films and maybe 10 plays, not only just high school plays, but college theater and film productions as well. So by the time I got to my undergraduate work, I went to college to study cello and piano and composition, and I ended up dropping the cello as a major just to really stick to composition. And instead, I ended up diverting for several years and studying political science and foreign policy. So I took another little detour in life before I came back full-time to music. And during my college years, a couple interesting things happened. I discovered the Balinese gamelan. From day one at music school, I was required to join the group. And I did it and I joined grudgingly because they were forcing me to spend something like 6 or 9 hours a week rehearsing with this ensemble. But what I didn't realize was that it was going to change my musical life forever. And if you know my music at all, and if you know Balinese music too, you'll begin to hear the connection with it. Something about the tuning of the Palog scale and the heterophonic interlocking rhythmic patterns just really moved me in a profound way, and it completely changed the way I hear and think about music. And I found out something else. That association with powerful flashes of color that were incredibly distracting, and my ability to hear every single pitch of everything around me all the time was suddenly discovered as a condition. A professor advised that I go ask one of the doctors who was also a researcher on campus to see if I had something called synesthesia. And sure enough, after some tests, they thought it might be the case. And then I was sent to a study at NYU, and which we also required everyone in my extended family getting, cheek swabs and mouthwash to get genetic testing, because they were pretty sure they were going to discover genetic roots for it at the time. And I went through a battery of tests where they discovered that this is an actual condition where people have different kinds of neurological responses to things. And apparently I have one with sound. But, my time studying there, I realized the music school was a very restrictive environment, and they didn't really want me going out and collaborating with other people. And so I had to make my own way, and I started finding more of a home in the multimedia journalism department, but especially the dance department. And I started working, especially with the graduate dance program. I would approach dancers and say, hey, would you like to do a show together? And we would hire, like 12 string players and some harps and all kinds of stuff. And they were beginning to fund me to write music all the time for their dance program. So I began to realize that I'm not so much somebody who enjoys sitting in a room alone writing, but more somebody who needs a visual prompt to work on, to generate new ideas. And I realized right then, I'm just a natural collaborator, and I think I'm going the right path in life if I veer toward film. And so during this time, I also started working with the journalism department more, and they had a few films that were destined to move on to PBS. And so I began to score those. And so by the time I applied for grad school at USC scoring for motion pictures, I had this long history of scoring films that have been out in the market, a lot of films that have gone to festivals. And I'd proven that I was a scrappy young player who can get local orchestras to perform stuff. I could get dancers to hire and bring me in to record live pieces with them, and so forth. And so when I started at USC, I was already in the mindset of being somebody who was looking to collaborate and serve other people's visions. And so, and that was what we were trained to do at USC Scoring. And I was thrilled to get into that program because it's difficult to apply and get into. And I discovered something that was going to be very important for my career. And as you'll see, it's going to be very important for the rest of this class. Is that I didn't really know what an orchestrator was. And what I learned, and basically an orchestrator is somebody who takes a musical idea for another composer and can stretch their idea out for a giant orchestra to play. And I didn't know what that was, and I didn't realize how prominent that was in film music, that most film composers work with orchestrators so they can finish their projects on time. And so I discovered that I was really good at it. A lifetime of playing cello in symphony orchestras and writing for all these local community groups and all these ensembles through college prepared me to be very good at writing for live players. And in fact, when I was struggling to launch my own career as a composer, for years and years, I mostly made my living working as an orchestrator, serving other A-list composers around Hollywood. I was often a orchestrator conductor package where I would arrange all the charts for them and go to the sessions and conduct them. And even while I was in college, I was still starting to orchestrate and conduct scores for bigger composers doing features, TV shows, video games, and I was even doing a series of Easter shows with the LA Philharmonic and Master Chorale, and continued working with the Pacific Symphony for years and years, writing arrangements and orchestrating for shows. And it was a really great way to get immersed into that environment. And there's so many ways you can do that. You can be a great audio engineer. You can be a great performer. There's so many things you can offer when you're getting started as a film composer. But this happened to be the thing I could offer well. And so during that time, like I said, I was trying to launch my own career. And what I did was work on countless student films while I was working for and being mentored by many other larger composers. And those student films ended up leading to more feature films as their careers rose. My career gradually rose. And then more of those people I met when we were students are now starting to go to major film festivals, win prizes. And suddenly they're directing TV shows. Now they're directing bigger features. And we kind of grew as a generation altogether. And at one point, I was finally taken on by the Gorfin Schwartz agency, and I finally had an agent. And I felt like, suddenly here's where I'm making the transition years later into a full-time life as a composer. But what I didn't see coming was the year 2008. Like all of us, it was a difficult time. With the market crash and the writer's strike, life was very difficult. And a lot of the people I've been working with for years were suddenly out of business. Their films weren't getting financed, and they were all leaving town. And I found myself not really knowing what to do or where to go, and some very difficult times looked like they were nearby. And so I go to this one Halloween event in Los Angeles and called their hotline after to tell them how wonderful I thought their show was, just as a compliment. And I made a couple musical suggestions though, and that led to that message getting passed around all the way to the owner of the park, who ended up asking for a meeting. We met. I wrote a score for her in the show, and then that led to that show coming out, but then a lot of other theme parks around that Halloween wanting stuff. And suddenly other theme parks around Los Angeles, Knott's Berry Farm and the like. And suddenly, not long after that, some shows in New York City, then in the Midwest, and suddenly in Asia, in Europe, and then a whole bunch of them in the UK for a while. Suddenly, right when I had no work on the horizon for a couple years as a film composer, the theme park business was booming, and I suddenly found a new home. And right around that time, I was also found by some publishers to start putting out more concert music. And so suddenly all these other avenues came along, and I was suddenly diversifying into a much different career. And then as that began to happen, people started to ask for more input about how I was able to manage that career, and that led to more speaking gigs and film music seminars, which turned into larger curriculums, to suddenly remotely teaching courses for universities all over the country and doing more speaking gigs, and finally getting invited to do a TED Talk on composition, which led to a really large amount of public speaking gigs. And that brings us to today. I've been working with colleges and universities for so long now, having provided so much content, have created so many curriculum as an instructor now of film music, that here we are today. I'm finally filming the whole series on all the basics you need to know about film scoring. So at long last, here we are, and this course is made just for you. If you'd like to learn more film scoring tips like these, sign up for free, and I promise you, these lessons will help you on your journey to becoming an accomplished film composer.